Welcome to the Sober by Design podcast, where we explore the many pathways to recovery and a better life through conversations with a wide array of guests. Whether you're sober curious, in recovery, or simply looking to improve your mental health and well-being, this podcast will have something for you. Each week, we sit down with inspiring guests from all walks of life who share their personal stories of struggle and triumph, offering valuable insights and practical advice on how to design a life worth living. From addiction and mental health to spirituality and creativity, we cover a wide range of topics that are relevant to anyone seeking to live a more fulfilling and authentic life. So join us on this journey of discovery, growth, and transformation, and start designing a new life. Okay, everybody, welcome to the Sober by Design podcast. Today, I have a very sort of a different but familiar type of guest for us. I have Leslie Lindsey Davis. Leslie is the author of You Can't Eat Love. She is also a speaker and an all-around wonderful person. So I'm thrilled to have Leslie on the podcast today and talk a little bit about her expertise, which is emotional eating and how that kind of fits into our lives. I think all of us do it to some extent. I think some of us do it more than others, and I'm really excited about this conversation. So welcome to the podcast, Leslie.
Well, Corey, I am so excited to be here. I've been listening to you, and I said, I get to actually talk to him. And anyway, I've been counting down the minutes until it was time to talk to you.
Great. Well, I'm happy to be here. So as always, I like to kind of dive a little bit back into your past and talk a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up. I think it gives that foundation of your story from maybe the challenges that you had in life to where you are now. It really does kind of paint that picture for us. So if you can just kind of give us an idea of what your early life looked like, that'd be great.
Well, I tell people, and this is what I discovered when I went on the journey to get healthy mentally, physically, and emotionally. Before going on the journey, I thought, well, I had a normal idyllic childhood growing up. And then when I started, discovering who I was, I had a whole different perspective of the way that I grew up. And when I realized I'm the oldest of 6 kids, that's number one. The youngest one is 8 years younger than I am. We moved about every 2.5 years. And part of that time, we lived in Venezuela. Well, when we lived in Venezuela, we had no less than 3 maids at all times. So I don't have memories of my parents being around because we were relegated to the maids. The other thing that I came to understand is as a consequence of, being young children, I was 6 when we moved down there, and my youngest sibling was born, while we lived down there. As a consequence of living that kind of lifestyle, there was a disconnect between me and my parents. And so I told people my parents were physically present, but emotionally unavailable. And I still can recall we had gone on vacation where they had sent the 3 older kids, myself included, back to the States for vacation. And then we were all meeting up in Mexico to finish off vacation before returning back to Venezuela. And at the end of that vacation, our parents told us that no, all of you school-aged children are going, which was 4 of us, are going back to the States with your grandparents. The other 2 kids and my parents were going to Venezuela to pack up the house and move us back to Texas. Well, that's a little confusing. First of all, I come up to the States on vacation and then I'm told I'm not going home. So I started school and I didn't fit in. I was in 6th grade and I didn't fit in. First of all, I'm in Texas. I don't sound like I'm Texan. I don't say ain't. I don't say y'all. I still do not say y'all. I say you guys. I could flip between English and Spanish as easily as I could flip between English and Spanish. I spoke better Spanish than the Spanish teacher. I didn't fit in. I didn't like how I felt in the school around the kids. And I was crying one night, and my mother came in and asked me what was wrong. And so I told her all of these things. And her response to me, I will never forget it, was, "You shouldn't feel that way." And I can mark that moment in time as being when I stopped sharing how I felt with my parents,
Mm-hmm.
because the confusion that set in. If this isn't how I'm supposed to feel, what should I be feeling? So then I didn't trust my feelings. I didn't trust my emotions. Also, during that time when we lived in Venezuela, it's not the, and even later, because we moved out of the big city and lived, sort of in the country where it was 30 minutes to a grocery store. So our mother only went once every 2 weeks. So it was never that we did not have the ability to get food. It's just that food was not easily available outside of what was in the house. So things that would be normal or normally available to most people were not available to us. So I grew up with this all or nothing, I'm never going to have it again kind of feeling about a whole lot of different foods. So then when I became old enough and had my own money and my own transportation, and I could get myself to a store, that feeling that I'm never going to have this again, so I better eat it all now in secret without anybody knowing, continued. Now, here I am. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. The family was extremely dysfunctional. And each one of us manifested that dysfunction in different ways. My drug of choice and 2 of my other sisters' drug of choice was food. One of my sisters, and close to one of my brothers, but definitely one of my sisters, her drug of choice was alcohol. She was an alcoholic. She has now been sober for, I want to say, close to 10 years. My other brother had to give up alcohol following an accident. And then my other brother, I have 2 brothers and 3 sisters. My other brother, his drug of choice was denial. So we all manifested that dysfunction in some way. And part of what I came to understand when I went on this journey to get healthy mentally, physically, and emotionally is I didn't have any clue who Leslie was. That was number 1. Number 2, I didn't know that I had permission to feel anything besides anger and shame. And that was scary.
So let me just kind of recap a couple of things, because I think that there was a lot there, and I just like to kind of take a minute to kind of go back. So you obviously bounced around a little bit as a child, and you were in Venezuela, but then came back to Texas, if I understood the story, somewhere around 6th grade. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
After that, you were in the States, full on.
Right.
Okay. But when you're in Venezuela, it sounds like you had not only, a large family unit there, but you had some amount of in-house maids, and they were kind of the caretakers, and your parents were maybe a little disconnected at that point. I'm gonna ask the question: were your parents involved in like the energy sector at all? Like,
My dad was a petroleum engineer.
okay, yeah. Anybody that I know that's kind of been down there, that typically that's kind of what brings them down to that area.
Yeah.
So,
And we lived in 2 different places. So even though we were in one country, we lived in 2 different places.
yeah. So I'm guessing that your dad also was probably working long hours at that point too.
Actually, no.
No. Okay.
No. They worked regular hours, but where we would find them, if we needed them, was at the club, where they would be drinking after, either after work or after having played golf. They were at the club drinking. If we needed something from them, that's where we would go to find them.
Interesting. So they were also using something to escape
Oh yeah,
something that
yeah,
was going on at that
yeah.
point.
When our mother died, our father was a full-blown alcoholic.
Okay. Okay. So there was obviously something there too, a little generationally.
Oh
Um,
yes.
yeah. And then again, you're living in an area maybe early on where it isn't easy to get to the food, so like you probably grew up in those early years pre-Texas. It sounds like maybe there was this idea of scarcity too. So like you
Correct.
have a couple things playing, right? There's this lack of sort of connection, and I think you said it good. Like your parents were there physically, but not emotionally. So that was interesting. Uh, it, and then there was one more thing in there that I just wanted to touch on. It sounded like maybe there were two. Were you going on like separate vacations from your parents, or were they?
2 years they sent us to the States
Okay.
instead of them coming to the States. They sent us to the States to stay with our grandparents, who we really didn't know very well.
Hmm.
And our grandparents turned us over to the maids in their house. So
Okay.
again,
Okay.
there are adults in the house who are physically present sometimes, unless they're working or on the golf course.
Yeah.
And the maids are taking care of us.
Yeah. And then as you grow up and you sort of like you kind of said like, okay, then this is what happened, right? You're acknowledging that every one of your siblings carried this sort of family dynamic into their adulthood in one way or another, be it food, alcohol, denial. Denial is an interesting one that you threw that out there because like that is something that some people won't consider a problem, right? It's like people who are in denial sometimes are like, oh, that person's just oblivious to what's going on in their family. But like maybe it's not oblivion, maybe it is denial. Or some people will see that as acceptance and that's not really what it is for some people. So I guess that is really up to the individual. So okay, so your childhood goes that way, and at some point you become an adult. And what happens at that point? Do you move out of Texas? Do you stay in Texas? Are you?
Well, interestingly, the day after I turned 18, we drove started driving to Alaska because my dad had moved everybody to Alaska.
Okay.
So they all moved to Alaska and I went to college. But I left with them to make the drive because we had to drive the car to the port in Seattle and put the car on a boat and go on to Alaska. So I tell people I stopped living with my parents the day after I turned 18 years old. They didn't even take me to college. My grandparents took me to college, and my grandfather complained the entire way taking me to college because I had a car full of stuff to take to college.
Yeah.
And when I got there, I had no car. I had no idea where I was. Fortunately, I was at Texas Tech in Lubbock, which is laid out very nicely. They laid all the streets out, east, west, north, south. They numbered them and alphabetized everything. So it's easy to get around, but you have to discover that. So I had to discover how to get around and how to go and buy all my stuff. And my mother generously would send $40 a month to me to spend on one meal a week. So I had $40, but I had money in the bank. So, and then the cafeteria, this was the fun one. I discovered in the cafeteria that I could go through the line more than one time.
So it was like an all you can eat kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you come from a situation where, and I talk about this in the book, You Can't Eat Love, I didn't learn portion control, but I did learn how to divide stuff by 8 because there were 8 people. I learned how to divide 1 can of green beans by 8. I learned how to, take 16 pork chops and each person gets 2. And, when it was gone, it was gone. And like I said, it's not that my parents couldn't afford to buy food. It's simply where we lived, it was not easily accessible. Okay. So going to college, all of a sudden, all this food is available, and you can, go through the line more than one time.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. That was very interesting. And then when I got out and had a job, well, you have money, right? And I had a car at that point in time. So,
Yeah. And just to go back to college, though, like college is a time where a lot of people start to form, I know for me, that's where my drinking started. I was out on my own. I was able to start to make my own choices. Maybe things weren't feeling good, right? You're a little bit unsettled. And for you, you were already carrying around this unsettled sort of feeling inside anyway. You talked about it, anger and shame, and now you're here at college, and you're using food to comfort yourself, and it's available in, like you said, like a constant supply at the cafeteria, so you can just kind of go through. I mean, I think a lot of people experience that at college too, right? I mean, there is sort of like that idea of like when you're a freshman, you kind of go out and you maybe don't eat as healthy as you could, right? You're doing late night eating, you're eating fried food, you're doing all these things that are just not maybe what you were used to at home. So for
right.
you at the start, were you seeing it as a problem, or were you just like, this is better than what I had?
I didn't see it as a problem, and I didn't see it as this is better than what I had. What I saw was there is this, and I'm never going to have it again. So I'm going to eat what I can get. And I did try the drinking part, and I tell people jokingly, I'm a failure as an alcoholic. 'Cause I did try to become one, but I don't like the taste of alcohol. So,
Listen, again, you said everybody in your family got something, so again, food. I've said it on here because I've had a couple people on, and I've talked about a bunch of different things. But I think personally, food is the hardest thing to deal with by far.
It's readily available, and it is necessary for life.
Right, right. I mean, I think love is another one that's pretty tricky for people. The love and the sex addiction is hard. But I think food is just so far beyond all of them that it's something that we don't talk about a lot and don't see as a real problem. I think a lot of people struggle with it as a quote unquote problem, right? And something that is problematic in people's lives because they just are like, well, just eat better, right? And it's that there's so much more to it. There's all that underlying stuff, and that's kind of what I imagine you're starting to get at. And again, that's kind of why I wanted to talk to you because I think there's a lot there that can be unwrapped. So now, sorry to just, I'm kind of jumping all over, but, you're in college, you obviously start your relationship with maybe the eating and the food there. You get a job, you're out in the real world. Now you have a car, you have more money. It continues on at that point. What, I guess for the listeners who don't understand it, like this isn't, you're not eating to just eat. You're eating because there's something going on inside you. Can you describe that at all? Or is that just like something that is hard to describe?
Well, it's really, and this is part of what I discovered, when I went on this journey to get healthy, mentally, physically, and emotionally. I started uncovering and understanding the thoughts that I was having, and they were subconscious. They were not, obvious thoughts. They were subconscious thoughts. The subconscious thoughts were, I'm never going to have this again. I'm going to eat as much of it as I possibly can in this moment. And I don't want anybody to know how much I'm eating. So if I need to, I'm going to eat it in secret. Now, I didn't end up with a weight problem until I was in my 30s.
Okay.
But because prior to that point in time, I would be able to balance. That's a really horrible choice of words, but it's the best one that I've got. I'd be able to balance that overeating with, not eating very much. So my weight stayed about the same. Now, it was not a healthy weight, but that's what it was. But the subconscious thoughts that were going on were that I'm never going to have this again. Then I had, a really eye-opening moment, and it happened around Mother's Day back in 2016. And this became the first few paragraphs of You Can't Eat Love. I was making a chocolate meringue pie to honor the memory of our mother. This year, our mother's been gone 40 years. And I never grieved that loss. But I was eating this pie, and at this point in time, I had actually lost 100 pounds. And I'd gone on this journey, and I was doing all this work. And it was in that moment that I understood that part of what I had been trying to do was eat memories. I was trying to eat love. And as I write in the book, or as I say in the book, I came to the realization that the food is not where the memories lie, that I cannot eat the love that I desired. And what I suddenly realized was I thought that nobody loved me. And what it turned out to be is I was the only person who didn't love me. And I had what I call a myself-sized hole in my heart. And I'd been trying to fill that with food because that was the only way that I knew how to get to the feeling that I experienced when I was growing up. And the number one experience that I felt when I was growing up was that I was never enough, that I was inadequate, and that I should be ashamed. But those were comfortable feelings.
Those were comfortable feelings for you to have. The
Correct.
shame, the not feeling enough. You felt okay with those.
Yeah, I didn't know any differently.
Okay. And when you say you're trying to eat the memories, like, are you eating to recall it, or are you eating to shut it off, I guess is my question.
To recall it, to re-experience it.
Okay.
I mean, for example, I don't know what part of the world. I think you're in the Northeast, aren't you?
Yeah.
But down here, we have brisket. Okay, and there's nothing better than a well-cooked brisket with the fat that's, rendered as much as it possibly can. But to eat that brisket fat and all that. Well, the only place I had brisket prior to being able to buy it myself was when we'd be at my grandparents' house, and Willie Mae, my grandmother's cook, would fix brisket. And I could remember, the family being there, the smells, the laughter, the kids, everybody. So when I would eat brisket, it would bring those memories back. And I could feel those memories again. But in the moment with this chocolate pie on this particular Mother's Day, I realized that the food is not where the memories were hiding. The memories were simply hiding inside of me, and all I needed to do to experience those memories was to remember.
Sure.
I didn't need the food to enjoy the memory.
Right. I get it. I guess my question is, there's probably that going on, and it's kind of like I'm trying to just frame it a little bit for myself in my head with drinking, right? So there's a couple of things that you said. So one, like when you were a little bit, before your 30s, you're able to kind of balance it out, right? You can eat and then, not eat, and it all kind of equals out, which I get. Like there was a time when I could drink, quote unquote normally, and then it kind of slipped away from me, right? And I can explain maybe the one night if I drank too much because it was always a party or something like that. But then there was a point, the tipping point, where it went the wrong direction, right? And once it went the wrong direction, there was really no getting it back on the rails. It was just off the rails, and I was headed down that path. even if there were days or maybe a week where it was somewhat better, because I hadn't fixed all the stuff, I was still like not on the rails, right? Like I still had all those same behaviors, the underlying issues, all that stuff was still going on. So I see what you're saying about eating the memories, the brisket, the pie, if there was maybe some salad or something, right? Like, because I can kind of do that with food too. Um, but are you also at that point like eating? Because the other part of emotional eating that I know is like you're kind of like, I'm having a bad day. I'm going to eat something and it's gonna calm that feeling down, right? Like food is my comfort. Was that your case? Or was yours like literally just to kind of almost bring yourself back to a place?
Well, I thought that I did not eat my emotions until I started tracking, writing down what I was eating and when I was eating it. And one day when I was making a list of things that I had eaten, and I said to myself, I'm looking at this list. It had, chips and Oreo cookies. And I said, what is going on? And this light bulb went off. And so I paused and I asked myself, and I wrote it down, what is really going on right now? And then I listened to what I was saying, and I went and started having a written conversation with myself, answering what was really going on. Now, up to that point in time, I had denied to myself that I ate my emotions. Having that one written conversation with myself showed me that I do eat my emotions. When I feel stressed or when I feel trapped, because other people are making decisions and I don't get to make a decision, when I feel trapped, that's what I want to do. And I started asking myself, why are you doing this? And the answer that I got was so that I could feel an emotion that I was comfortable with instead of feeling what I was not comfortable with. I was not comfortable with feeling sad. I was not comfortable with feeling happy. There's this long list I was not comfortable with. What I was comfortable with feeling was angry and shame.
Yeah.
So if I could do something to get myself, I was doing this all without being aware. If I could get myself to feel one of those two emotions, then it would all be okay. It would all be okay.
Huh. That makes a lot of sense. That, you know, because if you're not, if you haven't done the work, right, and you're just trying to find comfort, you are going to go back to what you're used to. And if you're used to anger and shame, how to get there is through this eating, right? Like that's what you're doing. I know, and this is how I know. I haven't really thought about, have I actually gotten better over the years? And I'm going to tell you that you just saying that makes me go like, okay, I've gotten better. I used to, there was this point in my life, and it wasn't that long ago, where I would almost self-sabotage. Like as things got better in my life, this is when I was still drinking. Like even if there was a hint that things were going in a good direction, I would self-sabotage because I guess I like that feeling of chaos that that maybe I grew up in, right? Like there was some comfort in the chaos. And I would do things to self-sabotage at that point. Now I can tell you that the thing I hate the most is chaos. It is something that I just try to avoid at all costs. Like in my work life, at home, wherever it is, chaos is something that I just don't want anything to do with. So like to me, that is a huge aha moment for me in this conversation, right? Because you were seeking that negative emotion. Like people don't understand that people who are like not well mentally are seeking a negative emotion. They can't quite understand that, right? Like they don't understand people going back for abuse. They can't. If you've never been there, you can't wrap your head around it. It is such a strange thing for a healthy person to try to understand. So
Well, the other thing is, you said that you were seeking chaos. For me, chaos was something that I couldn't stand because we grew up in chaos, and I wanted nothing at all to do with chaos. So when I'm exposed to chaos, then I am driven to do something so that I can feel better.
yeah, yeah,
And then, the other thing that I did before I really started doing, all the other food behaviors is I used to bite my fingernails. Actually, I would shred them down to the quick. And part of the discovery that I had for myself is I preferred the pain of ripping the fingernails off to the pain of what I was actually feeling or experiencing.
yeah. That I think that's a big one for people. I see that a lot. Pain is it's a powerful one, right? That is an
Yes.
epidemic of stuff out there. Another one that I just can't relate to, but I get it. I get it like at a foundational level of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So you obviously found food as your comfort and 100% understand the journey now, right? Like I guess I'll ask the question, do you consider, and I'm guessing yes is going to be the answer here. I don't know. Would you consider this like a disordered eating?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, yes, this is 100% a disordered eating.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that everybody understands that too, right? I think everybody kind of pockets disordered eating into very specific categories still. Um, I know I don't, because I kind of get this part of it, but like there's probably stuff that I just still don't get. And again, because it's so, you have to eat, right? Like that is the fundamental thing. Like we have to eat. So this isn't really explored as much as I think it should be. And I want to talk more about this with more people. It's a very hard conversation to have, right? It is there's so many things wrapped up in this conversation because we're talking about food and there's people who don't have food availability and and then there's the disordered eating and then there's issues around weight and what we find acceptable. There's all these there's so many things that intersect here. It's just a very complex conversation. So you said by 2016 you had lost 100 pounds, but you had your aha moment in 2016. So there was something that happened before 2016 where you changed some things, but
Well,
were you not
I'd
fully
had an
there?
emotional tsunami where, the world just kind of crashed in on me.
Okay.
My oldest son and his wife decided they didn't want to have a relationship with me. They were about to have their first child. My father had died, I want to say 6 weeks prior to that. My mother had died 2 weeks before this child, my first child, was born. And so I was thrown into this wash, rinse, repeat. Oh my gosh. I hate to say rock bottom because I feel like that's tempting the fate, to say I'll show you rock bottom. But I recognized, I needed to do something because whatever I was doing had landed me in the situation that I was in. And that was when I went on a journey to start getting healthy physically, mentally, and emotionally. And I'm quite certain that as you went on your journey to become, to be able to live a sober life, that you start off thinking that the journey is going to look one way, but you discovered as you went along that the journey looks a different way than what you anticipated. And what I thought was going to be simply a very easy or very hard physical journey ended up being a very hard mental, emotional journey. And as a consequence of healing and acknowledging of the mental and emotional pieces, the physical piece became easy because, as I like to say, the food started losing its power. As I started acknowledging the emotions and the feelings and started understanding, that I'd been trying to eat from memories. I'd been trying to, fill this emptiness inside of me, and food was never going to fill the emptiness inside of me. As I started becoming what I call my very best friend in the whole wide world, listening to myself, hearing what I was actually saying, good, bad, and different, and really genuinely being curious about why I was thinking those things. Why was I acting in such a way? It was doing all of that allowed me to not white knuckle my way through trying to, get the weight off and trying to keep it off. I was able to heal the pieces of me that were using the food to soothe my soul. And I'm quite certain that you've talked to plenty of people who are white knuckling their way trying to be sober. And just like with many things that we white knuckle our way through, we are going to run into something that's going to derail us. As you said so beautifully earlier, it's going to derail us. And when we get derailed, well, then all of that negative affirmation that we've been locking away is going to come rushing out and say, of course you failed. Why wouldn't you fail? What do you expect? And then we end up in a worse position than before. So as a consequence of actually having these aha moments, I was able to start really peeling the onion to see how I got to where I was and why I got to where I was.
Yeah. The derailed part is something that I think, the white knuckling, whatever we want to call it, right? Like a lot of us think that we're going to go on a journey, let's just say to stop drinking. And you could start that journey and just go, okay, I'm not going to buy alcohol anymore. I'm going to dump all my alcohol out. I'm not going to buy any, and it's going to be that easy. And that might work for a week, a month, 6 months, whatever. But at some point, you're going to hit that moment where the feeling comes up inside you that you need to regulate somehow. And I talk about this all the time, right? Like it's that internal thing that you're trying to fix with the external source. And if you were somebody who relied on alcohol, it's going to become overwhelming if you don't address it in some shape or form, right? By either talking to a therapist or finding a support group or talking to somebody like yourself about, how do I help myself over these hurdles, to really do that introspective work, to just say, okay, this is what I could do instead, right? So instead of picking up a drink, instead of going to that bag of chips, I'm going to do this. I'm going to write down a list, or I'm going to, go for a walk, or I'm going to watch a TV show or listen to this book on tape or whatever it is, right? We're just trying to find other avenues at that point. But I think the ability to acknowledge the feeling and go like, yes, I felt that. That was really bad. But I don't need to cover it up. It is a very hard thing to do unless you're being honest with yourself and really understanding that, like, again, these things are going to happen in life. You're going to have a bad day. You're going to have, maybe you're going to lose a job. You might get in a car accident. There's all these things that are going to happen, and you have to be able to kind of take them in and sit with them, and then but then come out the other side and understand that if you do the thing that was bad for you to begin with, you're only making it worse, right? Because then you have the car accident plus the night of drinking, or the car accident plus, that shame of going back to your vice, right? Like that is the thing that I try to tell people when I work with them. It's like, play that tape, right? Like if I do this, how am I going to feel a week from now? If I go have that drink, if I eat the bag of chips because I just had such a bad day. It's hard. It's not easy to be a human, right? So
no, it's not easy to be human, and it's not easy to sit in those emotions that we were never taught how to sit in. And I had people tell me, that they started cheating on their diet, and word choice is so important. The words that we speak are so important. And on my part of my journey was I started adjusting words that I allow in my life. First of all, I don't allow the word cheat. The only way you can cheat is on taxes, as test, or your significant other. Choices, there are no bad choices. There's only good choices, great choices, and not so good choices. Okay, so let's people are like, well, isn't a not so good choice a bad choice? Well, you know something? It's all about how it sounds inside your head. So somebody would say to me that they had cheated and they had, eaten whatever the heck they ate. And I was talking to this person and they were really struggling. And I asked them one time, I live in Houston. I-10 runs through Houston. And you talk about traffic jams, holy Toledo. I'm sure, there are other parts of the world that have them as well. But I asked this person, I said, all right, when was the last time you were in a traffic jam? And she said, oh, I was in one just the other day. It took me, 45 minutes to get somewhere. I said, so when you hit that traffic jam, did you consider parking your car, getting out and walking home? And she looked at me and she said, no, that would be crazy. I said, so, okay, if you hit a real traffic jam and you never considered parking your car, getting out and walking home, what was it that you did do? She said, well, I called a couple of friends and I listened to a podcast on the radio. I said, oh, that was great. And then what happened? Well, eventually I got to where I was going. I said, okay. I said, so you ran into a traffic jam in your weight loss journey. Mm-hmm. Why is it that you decided that you were going to park that car, get out, and walk home? And they looked at me and they said, what? I said, that's exactly what you did. You ran into this event in your life, this moment in your life, and instead of phoning a friend, changing the radio station, you parked that car, you got out, and you walked home.
Yeah.
She said, oh. I said, think about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, language, you brought up language. We talk a lot about language in the recovery sphere, where relapse is really not a word that we use much anymore. It's a setback, right? We try not to talk, use certain words have power, right? But I love the idea of a traffic jam, kind of in relation to a setback, because some people will just say like, well, I drank, so I might as well just keep going now. And it's like, that is just bad logic. You've done all that work. You kind of know where you're at and you know how good you can feel based on all that work that you did. And it's probably the same with the food journey, right? Like you've been doing it for 4 months and maybe you have a small issue. It's not worth it to just say, well, forget it. I've done it. Now it's all over. It's not all over. You have that 4 months of foundational work. Now you've had 1-2 days that maybe slipped up, and you had a little setback. Now you go forward, right? And you start that journey over. It's not even starting over. It's just like you're continuing it on. Yeah. Yeah.
You start exactly where you are. And if we stop and we really think about it, one of the things that I started doing, because I was catching myself, I started ignoring all of the not so great choices that I was making. If I was, making a not so great choice, or if I did something that I didn't plan on doing, whatever it was, anything negative, I ignored it, absolutely, totally ignored it. And I started celebrating all the wins. I didn't care if it was a tiny win, if it was a big win. I started celebrating all the wins. Mm-hmm. I started celebrating when I would realize that I was speaking to myself in a kind and positive way. Wow, that was amazing. And the book that really cemented this for me is called Don't Shoot the Dog. Now, please, it's not about shooting dogs. It's about training animals. The trainers that work with the animals at SeaWorld, they get the animals, doing what animals are doing, and behaviors that they want the animals to continue doing, they reward. So if the animal comes up and touches their hand, they reward that. Mm-hmm. The animal swims in a certain way, they reward that. But if the animal doesn't do what they want it to do, they just ignore it. And what I understood was I can do that with myself. I can do that with other people. Don't tell my husband I use that trick on him. But it works. It works. Because think about this. Everybody knows that one kid in class that is constantly acting out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we think that they are constantly acting out because they don't know how to behave. No, they are constantly acting out because they get attention.
Right.
Our brain doesn't know the difference between attention for doing things well or for doing things not so well. It just knows that it's getting attention.
Mm-hmm.
So if instead we start noticing, you know what, the other day I noticed that you were at that party, and yes, there was a whole lot of alcohol there, and you walked in and you said, I think I'm going to have just one drink, and you left having only had one drink. Wow, that is so amazing. I am so proud of you. Now, you may think that sounds crazy, but that is really and truly how I talk to myself.
Yeah.
I make a plan before I go into a party. This is what I'm going to do as I'm going through the party. I am so proud of you. You only had one dessert. That is so awesome. I can only imagine how you're feeling right now. Let's change how we talk to ourselves, change what we are acknowledging, change where we put our focus and our attention. And as we do that, we start changing how we feel about ourselves. And then as we change how we feel about ourselves and how we are talking to about ourselves, the people around us are going to start noticing that something is shifting. And then they're going to have two choices. Either they start changing or they're going to be moved to Pluto.
And some people don't like when you change, right?
No, my husband, in fact, he said about 5 months, I didn't tell anybody that I was going on the journey. About 5 months into the journey, he said, I don't know what you're doing, and I'm not sure I like it.
Yeah.
And I didn't say anything. I just smiled and went on about my business.
Does he like? I
'Cause
mean,
I
I'm guessing
realized it wasn't about me.
Right, right. But I guess he's appreciating it now, right? Like,
He appreciates it, but there are days when he still doesn't like the changes that I made. But you know what? It's not about him. It's about me.
yeah.
And what he feels is about him,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not in control of him. That's the other thing. I'm not in control of him. I'm only in control of me.
Right. But sometimes, when you have somebody who was maybe, not feeling good about themselves, again, carrying out a lot of shame and those people may be easier to sort of, and I'm not saying that this happened to you or, this is in generalities. Like sometimes people like that are easier to like kind of push in directions that you want to push them. Right. So like, somebody who isn't really in love with themselves it was very easy to like, yeah, they'll go along with whatever I want them to do, right? And then when that person starts to find their own esteem and starts to care about themselves and love themselves, now all of a sudden that person's like maybe speaking up and saying like, no, I don't want to do that anymore, right? Like, I don't want to hear you speaking to me that way or doing that. And like, that's when the relationships really start to change and you can see who you want to keep in your life. And moving people in and out of your life is a tricky thing because you kind of want to hold on to those people that maybe weren't that good for you, but now you're starting to see it. Like that is something that happens when you get healthier mentally. At least for me, it has.
Well, I allowed the people to make their own decisions. As I was adjusting what I was doing and how I was taking care of myself, the situations and circumstances that I was willing to be in started changing. But I allowed the people in my life, to make their own decisions, to move away. And yes, there are people that I thought were, lifelong friends that moved away. But you know what? That's okay. That's on them. That's not on me. And I see them on occasion. That's why I say I move people out to Pluto, where on occasion they orbit past. And
Yeah. I get it. I get it. I get it. And it's something that happens that I don't think you're aware of when you start this path. Like I don't know that. I mean, I wasn't aware that, hey, once I stop drinking and I get healthy, like there's going to be people that just kind of fall out of my life. But then there's other people that come into it. And I don't think that that's something that you really understand. And sometimes it can be a very shocking thing too. It can be somebody very important to you.
Exactly. And then that was one of the things that I needed to get clear with myself about. Who is it that I'm in control of? Who am I not in control of? And what are my intentions in the actions and the words that I'm taking and the words that I'm speaking? What are my intentions? Mm-hmm. Also, something that was really critical was understanding that how I felt about something was how I felt about it. And as I like to say, your feelings are your feelings and nobody else gets a vote. Because how many times, and this was part of what drove my eating too, how many times have you told someone how you honestly felt and their response was, you shouldn't feel that way?
Right.
And then you've got that internal tension. And if you are someone who is involved in an unhealthy behavior to resolve that tension, you're going to go back to that or turn to that unhealthy behavior in order to relieve that tension. So what I started saying to myself is, whatever somebody says about what I should or should not be feeling doesn't make any difference to me. I'm standing on my feeling. My feeling is my feeling. And in fact, somebody called me over a situation, and I told them how I felt, and they kept saying, you shouldn't feel that way. And I would respond, how I feel is how I feel. And the fifth time she told me I shouldn't feel that way. And the fifth time I responded, my feeling is my feeling. She said, I wish you would quit saying that. And I responded to her, I will quit saying it as soon as you quit telling me how I should be feeling.
Right. Yeah.
Our feelings are our feelings. And if we can get honest with what we are feeling, whatever our drug of choice is going to start losing its power. And part of the way that I recommend that people get in touch with how they're feeling and get honest with it, it's get pen and paper. Start having written conversations with yourself. What is really going on right now? Acknowledge. I don't care how ugly it is. I don't care how ugly the feeling is. Acknowledge, well, of course you feel that way. Why wouldn't you be feeling that way? Can you tell me more about it? And you would be surprised at how the oceans will start calming. I'm not going to say they're going to be totally calm, but the oceans will start calming.
Yeah. No, journaling is a great tool for people, and one that probably isn't used enough. So I know, I want to be respectful of time, and I want to get a little information about the book and understand what led you to write your book. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but really, what was the sort of the jump off point where you said, like, I have so much I have to say, I got to get a book out there?
I kept saying the same thing over and over to people. I kept talking about the traffic jams. I kept talking about, you need to put your own oxygen mask on or you're going to be laid out in the aisle and everybody's going to walk over you. I kept talking about how your feelings are your feelings. I kept talking about the same thing over and over and over again. And people said, why don't you put it in a book? And I was like, I've never written a book in my whole entire life. So I wrote the book. I wrote the book.
Have you?
And then I just, anyway, the book tells the story.
Okay. Have you enjoyed, was it an enjoyable process for you?
It was terrifying.
Terrifying.
Actually, the writing of it was okay. The publishing of it, I wanted to throw up for about 3 weeks because I was terrified. Because I don't hold anything back. I expose, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. I was terrified of what people would think about me. And And I had one person who I've known and was on many committees with, she sent a text message to me, and her message was, how did someone who appears so pulled together know every thought I was having?
Yeah. Yeah, it's putting yourself out there is hard. And I think once you do it, it gets easier. But that was a great response from somebody that you knew, really, and there probably was maybe some that were not in that vein, but it's okay. It's, you're doing it to help the next person. And I think that that's why people like yourself do it, right? You're not at the heart of it, you're not really afraid of the criticism or the bad, the bad way that somebody might take it in. You're looking to help one person, two people, three people, and have that message shared throughout and touch as many lives as you can. And a book is a great way to do it. Everybody chooses a medium. Right now I'm doing this. This is how I've chosen to do it. I don't know that I could write a book.
Sure you could. I'd be happy to help you.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually have it on my
You have quite a few stories. You have quite a few stories to tell.
I have it on my list of things to do almost every day is write. It's for me, it's the time. Somebody told me I should just write on the weekends, but
all you need is 15 to 20 minutes every day and you can do it.
yeah, that's a good amount of time. So and has the book found a place in the world? Have you gotten a lot of feedback from it?
I get feedback from it all the time, and it's hit bestseller on Amazon multiple times. My goal, my objective when I published the book was to help one person at a time. My dream was to help 1 million people and then start over again. And I'm well on my way.
That's awesome.
This past October, I published what I call the backstory to You Can't Eat Love, and that's the journey from failing to healing, and that really goes a lot deeper into the struggles. The You Can't Eat Love is more about the tips and the tools and the things that I used in order to calm the oceans of my soul and be able to change the relationship with food. The journey from failing to healing is the ugly work. And then I'm working on my next book, which is called What Color Is My Shirt, which is about trusting your emotions, because I feel like we are at a critical point in time and people don't trust what they're feeling. And as a consequence, we're, leading to increases in depression and suicidal thoughts and, heading for whatever drug of choice they can get their hands on. So if I can help people to safely learn how to trust their emotions, well, then I've done my job.
That's great. That's great. And your book is available on Amazon, and I'm going to link everything on the show notes so people can find you and they'll be able to find your social media platform. I'm only on Instagram, so I'll link the Instagram account, and I think they could probably navigate to anything else that they might use. I myself got off Facebook because I just can't. I couldn't do it anymore. The other thing, and again, I think your story is great, and I think what you're doing is tremendous, and it is such a hard topic to tackle. So you're doing it in a way I think that's very approachable, and I'm sure folks are coming to you because of that, right? It doesn't feel, I don't know, it doesn't feel as heavy as some things that I've heard in the foodscape, and that's what I'll say about it. I do like to end my show on a little bit more of an up note, and I am a big fan of media and recommendations from people, just like anything that you're taking in, books, TVs, podcasts, music, anything like that. I love to hear what my guests are into these days. Is there anything that you're taking in that you'd like to share?
Well, when I saw that question, I said, "Holy Toledo! What could I?" The movie that always stands out to me, and it's one that is quoted in my family, and it's almost a requirement, for anybody coming into the family, the wives. I have 3 boys, so the wives all had to watch it. And I think it is such an appropriate movie on all levels, is The Knight's Tale. And part of the reason that I love that movie is, it's talking about somebody who people thought was nobody, but he believed in himself. And then you've also got Chaucer in there, and the whole line of, is this the road to ruin? And he says, well, that remains to be seen. Anyway, it's an amazing movie. If I have to recommend a movie, I would recommend Knight's Tale. Coming up behind it, I would recommend Young Frankenstein. Yes, I know, an older one.
That's a good one.
That's another great one.
Yeah.
And anything Monty Python.
Okay.
So those are my recommendations.
All
the
right.
books that I read are insane. So,
Well, I have the one, Don't Shoot the Dog, so I'm going to link that.
That's right. Don't shoot the dog.
Yeah,
Don't shoot the dog.
I'm going to
Yes.
link that one.
Mhm.
And for me, this, like I say, I think I say it every week. It is a hard thing to do, but we watch a lot of stuff. At night we sit down and we watch shows. My wife and I will sit, after the day's over. So at about 9 o'clock, we can kind of sit and watch an episode of something here or there. But we've been watching a show with our youngest son on Netflix, and we started a while ago. I don't think I've mentioned it. It's Manifest. It was on normal TV at some point, and I think Netflix bought the rights. So they've produced a couple seasons, and we're like right in the middle of it. It's kind of like a science fiction show, but there definitely are there's definitely like religious overtones to it. And just a very interesting story. Kind of reminds me of the show Lost that was on a while ago.
I love that show until the end.
I know, until the end. Lost was great until the end. And I'm hoping Manifest stays as interesting as it has throughout. Again, just a very well thought out show to this point. We are going to be wrapping up season 3, hopefully tonight. As at least the 3 of us. My older son has not jumped on this one with us, and that's really my only media for the day. I did just start watching something, but I don't know if it's good, so I'm not going to recommend it. And
But I watch a lot of British TV. My husband's like, why do you watch the British TV? I said, because I don't think the American shows are done as well. So
yeah, and there are some great British shows too. We've watched some great British like crime shows that we've really enjoyed. There's not as many on. Well, there probably are on Netflix. We just we kind of go back and forth between crime, drama. For a while we got on the political shows. We really enjoyed those. So I find that if I'm watching comedy, something a little bit more lighthearted, I'm a little
Yes.
bit more lighthearted. So the Manifest thing's kind of in sci-fi is like whatever. It's it's not crime. So crime definitely puts me in a different mindset.
Yeah, you see zombies behind every tree.
Yes, exactly. Well, Leslie, I really appreciate you being on the podcast tonight. I think, anybody that's listening can take something out of this, be it if you have problem around food or alcohol or, TV or social media, whatever you're using to cover up something inside of you. I think what you're talking about is really good. The traffic jam thing was great. I love that as a tool, and I'm going to use that one moving forward, if you don't mind. And
As long as you give me credit, I don't mind it.
I will. Just use it more for people I coach on the side. And I will link everything in the show notes so that listeners can find you. If you just wanted to leave everybody with one final thought, what would it be?
That you are enough exactly as you are. And if you don't believe it, I will believe it for you until you are able to believe it for yourself.
Great. Thanks so much. And everybody, if you can go like, subscribe, comment on the podcast, it does help get it out to more people, and that is the goal. So do that, and we will be here next week. Thanks so much.